Hey everybody, this is Miss Williams, and we are going to do a flipped video classroom for factoring. And this is the first video that we're doing on factoring. So we're going to factor trinomials when a is equal to 1, and we're going to talk about the difference of two squares. These are both things that hopefully you have seen before. So let's review what factoring actually is. Factoring is when you have a number or quantity, or a factor is when you have a number or quantity that when it's multiplied by another produces a given equation or expression. So what you're looking for are two things that multiply to give you what you originally started with. So if I asked you if we put numbers to this, what are the factors of 12, you'll probably come up with several of them out of your head. Well, they are 1 and 12, because 1 times 12 is 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So each one of these individually are a factor of 12. So now we're going to factor trinomials when a is equal to 1. So when given a trinomial with a is equal to 1, you try to find two numbers that will multiply to give you the constant, which is the number at the end, and add to give you the middle coefficient. So here's an example of a trinomial. Tri meaning 3. It has three terms. X squared, 4x, and negative 12 are its three terms. So what I want to do is I want to first think about how I could get negative 12. What could I multiply together to get a negative 12? Well, here are all the different possibilities that could happen when I multiply to get negative 12. 1 and negative 12, or negative 1 and positive 12. 2 and 6, or negative 2 and 6. 3 and negative 4, or negative 3 and positive 4. Alright? There's only one of these combinations, however, that when I add them, I get positive 4. And those are negative 2 and positive 6. So the x squared, the first term, will break down into x and x. And then the two factors become x minus 2 and x plus 6. So those would be my two factors. Another type of factoring is called difference of two squares. You've probably seen this before. It's called a special case of factoring because you have the difference of two quantities that have actually been squared. So before we actually begin that, you need to make a mental note, or make notes, not mental note, make a note in your notes, or write down in your notes all the square terms from 1 to 12. So what you should have is the beginnings of this. 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 2, go 3 squared is 9, go all the way till you get to 12, just to remind yourself what those are called perfect squares, what those perfect squares are. Okay. The next thing you need to do is write down the formula for, that should not be fro, the formula for difference of two squares. And the formula is if you have a squared minus b squared, two quantities that are being subtracted, and they're both squares, so this is called difference of two squares, that they factor into a plus b and a minus b. Alright, let's try an example. So x squared minus 36. The first thing you have to do is make sure that both of these quantities are something that has been squared. So I could rewrite it if I wanted to as x that is being squared, and then 36 is 6 that has been squared. Alright, and because it's a difference problem, you cannot do this with an addition problem, only with a subtraction problem, okay? So therefore, the factored form, I don't really have to do a lot of math, I just have to do the square root of 6, and I get x plus 6, x minus 6. And it doesn't matter which order you put it in, x minus 6, x plus 6, okay? The last thing I want to talk about before we end is solving trinomials. So what we just did was find the factors, but if instead the directions had for us to solve the trinomial, then you would just need to do one additional step. Once you get the factors, you set each factor equal to 0 and then solve for x. Here's an example. This is a trinomial with a, the first term, being 1, x squared minus 9x plus 20. So I'm looking for two numbers that multiply to give me 20 and add to give me negative 9. So I think about those in my head or write them on my paper, whatever's going to help me the best. And I know that negative 5 times negative 4 gives me positive 20. And then when I add negative 5 and negative 4, they give me negative 9. So the factored form is x minus 5, x minus 4. Okay? But the directions for this problem say to solve it. So I have to take it one step further, and I'm going to set each of those factors equal to 0. So x minus 5 equals 0 and x minus 4 equals 0. Then I have maybe like a 7th or 8th grade, you probably did this in 7th and 8th grade when you just had one thing to do to an equation to solve. So you add 5 to both sides of the first equation, you get x equals 5, and you add 4 to both sides of the second equation, you get x equals 4. So you have solved the trinomial. Alright, we'll cover some more of this in class. Make sure you have your notes when you come to class.